what we're going to be talking today in this product demo. So from an agenda standpoint, we want to get familiar with what Collate's free managed OMD platform is all about, and how this is different from just the open source version of OMD. We also want to get you guys productive as fast as possible. So thinking about how we can set up your data connectors, I'll do a variety of walkthroughs, one, within the tool in the UI, similar to what Beta did at the last meetup, but I'll also take it a step further and show how we can, run this ingestion job to get metadata into the tool, via your own infrastructure or your own device, just offering that extra layer of security, thinking push versus pull. I've mentioned a couple times bridging the gap. We want users to collaborate. So we'll also talk about what that would look like to bring, users and people into the, free tier Collate platform to, start working together and accessing shared metadata. And then we want to start thinking about discovering and exploring, your assets within that you bring into your tier and understanding how we can take it a step farther from just ingesting metadata, but starting to curate, starting to bring in profiling or data quality or lineage, and think about what that will take as well. So first, getting familiar. Collate's free tier is available for modern data teams focused on getting OpenMetadata up as quickly as possible. So instead of spending all your valuable time, running infrastructure and installing this tool and then managing this tool, the free tier offers you a little bit of a shortcut, an expediter or an accelerator to get that. So it kind of handles that variable of the equation of not having to run your own infrastructure. The free tier is our Collate SaaS version of OpenMetadata. It also allows you to start building and managing high quality data assets. So really thinking about just getting to the meat of things, and then thinking about how you could improve productivity and collaboration surrounding some of these assets. It's really easy to sign up for the free tier. You will just go to our lovely www.getcollate.io website, and you'll see in a couple big orange ovals, get Collate free. You click on it, and then you add your name, company, email ID, password, and confirm your password. And then an optional use case. This is just going to allow us to better understand what is your goal or intent out of this free tier. Is it to, get more familiar with our SaaS offering and see if it's up to par? Is it to kind of run a mini POC or anything like that? Really allowing us to get to know you better and, being able to help serve you better. Again, thinking about different ways, and then we just simply sign up. I will call out the free tier does have some limitations. It's free tier, but it does have the limitation of it supports 500 different data assets and up to 5 users. So really designed to getting you exploring, but in an easier setup, lowering that barrier of entry of having to set up your own infrastructure and getting you more familiar, with the platform as quickly as possible. So thinking about how we want to get quickly as possible, we want to think about how we can set up our data connectors. Thinking about this, it's much like OpenMetadata. We want to bring your data into a centralized platform. And to do this, it first starts with setting up a data connector. We can do this one of two ways. One, we can do a quick setup to run workflows through the UI, where it's just a matter of, pointing and clicking, entering a few credentials, and then there we'll have it. We can also run the ingestion framework with any orchestration. So I'll also be demonstrating that in just a second here. But let's jump into the free tier. So just to kind of show, I do not have any current assets inside this free tier. I have 0 data assets. So if I wanted to, connect to Redshift, I can go to settings. I want to add a service. And in this case, I'm going to add a database service. I'm going to add a new service here in blue. And then I'm going to type red. And then I'm going to click on Redshift, and then I'm going to hit next. And I'm just going to call this Redshift UI. And I'm just going to go free tier demo. You don't have to put a description, but I get confused easily when there's not. And then I'm going to hit next. And then I already have some of these things filled out. So my username, the password, the host and port, and then the database name. I can choose to ingest all databases, but in this case, I want to just ingest that dev database. We have some advanced configurations, but I want to test my connection. Fingers crossed, because this is a live demonstration. So, you never know what's going to happen. I did test this a million times, but sometimes it's that millionth and one time that likes to go astray. So, as we wait for this, this is going to establish that connection and make sure that we can connect to Redshift. And then it should check all these things in green. And once it does that, I will hit OK and proceed to the next step. So there we are, massive success on the millionth and one time. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit OK and save. So now essentially what I have here is a Redshift data service. I can then click onto add ingestion, and then I can choose what I'm actually going to pull in. So right now, all I did was establish the connection. I'm not pulling anything in at this exact time. I do want to specify what I want to bring in. I don't want to bring in everything in that database. So I'm going to include these two schema patterns, this demo DBT and then this DBT test. And this just takes regex. The other nice thing that I should have called out on the previous step is we have the documentation with us on the right-hand side, just to allow us to understand, what is this field, and not having to go between, multiple tabs and trying to understand what's what. It's available here for the ingestion job, but we would also have seen it on that last page of setting up the connection. Other things, we can go at the table level to filter in patterns, and some other flags here that we can choose to, mark yes or no. Just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to scroll past a lot of those things and then click next. I can then schedule when I want this to happen. Do I want it to happen daily, weekly, off hours, on hours? This is a nice, scheduler, but I could also do a custom schedule that could take a cron expression. And then I'm going to hit add and deploy and then view service. So now this Redshift UI is just the database service that I have set up. And then if I click into ingestions, I have that metadata ingestion job. Note, it doesn't just run automatically. I'm going to want to then go to the little vertical ellipse here and then click run. So now it is queued. If I give it a second or two and hit this refresh button, it should show running, or maybe it's more than a second or two. So now it is running. And then if I give it another moment or two, it should show success. Again, fingers crossed. And then what that's going to essentially do is allow me to have content within this platform and this tool. And again, I want to go back to this, slide briefly that we were just seeing. Is the first thing I've just done is this ingestion container via the UI. I didn't have to run anything outside. It was all just inside the tool, inside the UI, pointing, clicking, copying, and pasting a few things over. If I shift back now, I'm going to then refresh. Still shows running, so I'll talk some more to this slide. Once that does show success, I'm going to show how we can run this on your infrastructure using a YAML configuration and just a little bit of Python in order to accomplish the same thing. What this essentially allows us to do, doing it on our own infrastructure, is address any security concerns that we may have by essentially pushing the relevant metadata into the Collate platform as instead of pulling it from the UI. So just a different in how we're getting things in, but ultimately we want to demonstrate how simple both things are. So now we have the ingestion job, success. Thank you, whoever prayed to those demo gods for me. If we go to these database, we have that dev database I specified, and we have those two schemas that I called out, DBT test and DB test HAFL. I can then go into customer and I can see a variety of different information. I can then start thinking about, descriptions and tags and glossary terms, ownerships, domains, all those other cool, things as well. So now I'm going to go back to the Redshift UI. I want to call out, this is called Redshift UI. What I'm going to do now is switch views briefly and show I have a service name here in the YAML file called free tier Redshift. Now, you don't need to come up with this YAML from scratch. I certainly didn't, not even for the sake of this demonstration. What I did is I went to our documentation, I went to the Redshift connector, and then there is this workflow configuration, which gives me the YAML file. I made some, slight alterations like the service name, and I entered my credentials. So again, we see the username. I've stored the password as an environmental variable, just not to show you guys all of it. Specified the database and post, and then also some of those extractions that I specified. So I only want DBT tests in that schema. I've also specified that there as well. And then when we get into the workflow configuration, I obviously need to specify where I want this to go. So it is my URL for my instance, and then \API, the authentication provider I left as OpenMetadata, and then this JWT token that I have here, that can be found by going into settings and then bots. There should be an ingestion bot, and I just taken this, copied it over, and stored it as an environmental variable there. I've also specified the ingestion pipeline FQN. This is something I want to call out. I'm a visual person. I don't want this to seem like, magic. This is going to give us, if we go back to our service that we have, this is going to give us this ingestion tab. We're not going to be able to run or do anything to it like we see here, but it's at least going to show us recent runs and statuses when we move forward. But again, I'm going to go here for a second, and that's my YAML file. There's more alterations we can make to this. We can also create these YAML files for other services like lineage or usage or profiling. But for right now, the first step is just getting metadata into the platform. I then turn it over to my terminal where I use Python, and I wrote a little script just to, take care of some cleanings and whatnot. So now all I need to do is run this Python script and pray, fingers crossed, that this sets up. And again, what we're going to see here, if everything goes well, is a new database service called free tier non-UI. Free tier Redshift is what we should expect here in the database, or maybe just Redshift once this passes through. Usually only takes a couple moments. It's not any faster or slower than what we saw in the other one. But this is allowing us, again, to run this from our own infrastructure. Again, looking at the Python I wrote, it was really just to get around the HTTPS and incorporate some of those environmental variables I set, and then having me raise some basic flags. In total, 69 lines of code that maybe took me, 30 or so minutes to write. We can share this out afterwards, after a little scrubbing, just so you guys can, take and run some of this as well. Also, what we're going to notice is from a scheduling standpoint, I had to manually hit run for this. We can use, what's based native here in my, instance and on my infrastructure, whether it's, the Chrome extension, cron tab, or cron job to run this, or whatever other orchestration tool you guys want to pick up and run some of these jobs. Again, today is my lucky day, success in here in blue. So now if I go here and hit refresh, I now see that free tier Redshift just stated. There is no owner because I did it outside of the tool and I used that bot ingestion. There's also no description that I added. But now if I click into free tier Redshift, I see that dev database, and then I can also see my ingestion. Note, like I mentioned, we could deploy, edit, kill, and delete, but there is no run job. We have to run this outside of the UI. I can then go back into my database, click dev, and I'm seeing those schemas as well. So 2 different flavors to get metadata into your tool. Really straightforward process. And again, allowing you to have that flexibility we talked about between, running it through the UI or using your own orchestration and running it on your infrastructure. Now, thinking about, what I just talked about, again, ingesting metadata kind of talks to those points a little bit more in greater detail. So just giving you that control on where to run it. And then thinking about the next step is, all right, I now have metadata inside of the Collate tool. How do I get users to collaborate? I can then shift my focus into going to settings and going into team, user, and management. I can then go to users and I can add a user. So I just need to put their email. Just made up a fake email for now, Joe Perez at Acme Corp. I could just call him Joe Perez. And then it is going to generate a password. I can specify this password if I want. And then I can, let Joe Perez know that, hey, use your email to sign in and this password. Make sure you change the password when you log in. And then now we can have an additional user. So other things we can think about doing is also setting up teams or personas, roles, or policies to make sure that we're, governing and controlling this in an appropriate fashion. Maybe the people we do invite to the Collate tool, we want to control what they're able to see and do. We can also think about, pointing towards tags or assignments and things like that. Thinking about what Collate is, it's all about collaborating and coming together from a sake of metadata, observability, governance, and lineage, but also from the understanding and viewpoint of users coming together to annotate, tag, and asset ownership and things like that within the platform. So I'm just going to cancel this for now and kind of go back to that exploring. So before I didn't have anything in search. Now I do have these redshifts. So I can go in here, go to customer and start, adding descriptions, hello world, so on and so forth. Now I will call out right now, the only thing that we've done was ingest metadata. I go to this activity feed or sample data or queries, we're not going to see that quite yet. If I wanted to add some of that, what I can go to is go back into my ingestions, going to stick in the UI for now, just for, ease, is I can add multiple other types of ingestions. Maybe I want to add a profiler ingestion. I then again can, specify schemas that I want to be profiled. So I'm just going to use the same ones in this case. And then I'm going to scroll. And then I want to call out one thing here is this process PII sensitive. This is unique to the Collate platform. This is going to allow us to mark certain things as auto tagged. So things that should be sensitive or not sensitive, it's going to make that decision for us. Again, just accelerating that time to value a little bit quicker. Those sensitivity flags will also help in the masking of sensitive data. So I'm just going to hit next, add and deploy, and view service. So right now it's not running. It's going to run at 12 a.m. on Monday. So I'm just going to go here again and hit that run. Now this one I've only tested 100 times, not a million times. So let's hope on the 101th time we have that profiler working just fine. And again, we offer this flexibility by having these different types of ingestion to give you more flexibility. Again, these things can be ran by either YAML files or again, natively here in the UI, just from a, getting you to value a little bit quicker. This profiling job that's running right now, just for a little bit of context, is allowing us to see sample data. It's also going to be responsible for our data quality jobs and things like that. So any test scenarios that we create is going to be handled by this profiling ingestion. And we'll also have, as a caveat, always have metadata ingestion ran before profiling, so it knows what to profile. I'm going to refresh and hopefully I see running now. So again, that's a good sign. I'm also going to take a look in the chat. Seems like there's been some activity and seems like certain things have been answered for us. So thank you, Harsha, and all that's been hitting some of these questions for us. Stir running. And yes, that I think is one of the strong elements of that PII detection, that we do use both. It does look at the pattern. There's some great documentation on what pattern criteria that we look at. One example that I like to use is something like a social security number. It's going to just see numbers, but it's going to see 3 numbers dash 2 numbers dash 4 numbers. That pattern fits what we would expect for a social security number. Date of birth, email address, phone number also have these distinct patterns. So we don't need to rely purely on, is this just saying ID? Is it saying social? But we could also look at some of that pattern behind it as well to generate that type of insight in PII classing. PII one is a great use case for that automation, just because when you think about low-hanging fruit and things you need immediately, PII is one that you don't want to go object by object, having to tag. It would be nice to get that, sort of lift and shift, if you will. As this, runs, I will also call out within the Collate tool, we have the way to govern and through automation. So, just kind of looking at what some of those automations can look at, you can define your own automations, and let's just call this one PII. I can add data sources to be tables, and I see that 42 assets meet that criteria. Maybe I want the owner to be this, or the column name is bank transfer amount, whatever it may be. And then I want to add the action of adding a tag, and that tag be, sensitive, or bank number in this case. I can do that as well. That's going to be separate from this, profiling job that we have set up. It's just showing off another capability of automation within the Collate tool. Hopefully I've stalled enough. Sadly, I haven't. It looks like it's still running. But that just kind of speaks to the different ways we can get some alerts within automation within the Collate free tier. Some other nice things I will add that's not available in the free tier, but it is available within the Collate tool is when I do look at some of these things, it's not available again within the free tier, but it is available in the Collate tool. We have the ability to use AI to generate descriptions. So instead of hello world for customer, you can have a proper description of customers or any of these objects that we see here. So just thinking about that, it's actually interesting. We're starting to see tags actually populate through. So although the job isn't complete, we do see that these things, weren't there prior, but now they are being generated in the UI. So if we actually just take a shift back into my database services, my free tier Redshift, which has the same schemas, going into this customer one, has no tags. There's no profiling job being ran for this free tier Redshift. But if I click back into the Redshift UI, which does have this profiler running, I'm already seeing things populate through in the form of these tags. So again, person, sensitive, last name, non-sensitive, date, time, first order, date, time, non-sensitive. Again, giving me that insight. Maybe we weren't happy with the fact that last name is non-sensitive. That's okay. We have a solution for that. And what that solution would be is going into this ingestion. Obviously, we would have to rerun it. But if we edit and go to this advanced configuration, we can set the confidence interval to 90 or 99 or 50. Whatever we want that to be, that's going to give us better insight and understanding of how sure do we want us to be about PII and, address for, overly cautious or not cautious enough type action. So just want to kind of show that off. It is still running, but we were able to see, those things come into light again by looking at this customer table, these PII flags. Again, that just kind of goes to that last point of thinking about discovering, exploring. One great way of doing this is through things like automation. But again, we want to also encourage being able to go to these objects and add the necessary information, assigning an owner out. Maybe I want to assign it to a team or an individual user. Maybe I want it to be Sal the steward to be the owner of this, or I want to assign proper tiering all things that are important to getting, value out of it. I think it's the context surrounding your assets and the context around that context that really becomes important and meaningful.